we have people operating in those realms because we were made to. They're making moral decisions. They notice these things about the world, but they're untethered from any kind of grounding that would make it meaningful.
Now, there's a lot of talk out there about how close Peterson is to becoming a Christian. And I'll be careful what I say here because I don't know him. I have no insight beyond.
I know. I'd love to ask him. Mm-hmm.
Well, here's what I think, though. People keep saying he's really, really close. Well, maybe, but there's also a point where that closeness, what's the way to put this, becomes a kind of blindness that now you start drifting further and further away, even if it seems like you're close. Because he keeps using this language like, well, he says that sounds an awful lot like God. But if you listen closely to what he says afterwards, he explains a bit his conception of God. He does talk about this transcendent unity that he said, I've been tapping toward. So he's really plagued by this idea and convinced that there's something beyond, and there's a unity to it. And this unity grounds meaning and purpose, even in things like the arts. But he offers a definition there. He doesn't say, here's my definition of God per se, but this is his definition of God that he then offers, is his notion of this transcendent unity, this God. He would call it the central animating spirit of mankind at its best. Peterson has many times made comments regarding evolution, and he seems to come from an evolutionary perspective on just humanity. And so it seems to me that what he's trying to figure out is, what is it that evolution produced, that it's in some way transcendent, that it is this subordinate unity that at its core is the central animating spirit of mankind at its best. So you can see what he's trying to build here. In a sense, this is something objective. It's not subjective entirely, although it might be hard to argue how something objective can come through an evolutionary process that benefits the human race. There seems to be an element of subjectivity there, but you see at least what he's trying to do. This is something that's beyond us in a sense, that is the best of humanity, and it is the animating spirit behind all of it. It goes beyond us. It's something that we can be bound to in a sense, something that grounds meaning and value beyond arbitrary subjective preferences, because he keeps coming back to, it's not just pleasure, it's not just pleasure. So what I think he's after here, though, is this kind of new form of spirituality that makes sense of ethics, makes sense of truth, and makes sense of beauty, but it is not the Christian God. So before I get too carried away, and this is all, of course, speculative. If I were sitting down with him, he might say the exact opposite. This is what it seems like to me. And if I'm going to bolster my argument, those that are really pursuing the God of the Bible don't leave things like this in how do I want to say it? There's a little bit more clarity, I think. So it's another way of me saying, I think I'm right here. So yeah. Eat those words later. I'll be happy to eat them, by the way. But what do you think about all that?
Well, that was a lot. So I think that first off,
what I want to get to with that, is what are we to do with this? That's kind of what I want to, move this conversation to. If what we're saying is true, that the arts point to something, as even like Peterson and Doyle, who's an atheist, believe. What do we do with that? I think what Peterson is doing with that is he's trying to find a rationale for the belief in something transcendent, but not a creator God in the way that Christians understand who God, the Christian understanding of who God is. So that's where I know it's a lot to take in. I just ran my mouth a ton, but that's kind of what I'm after is, what do we do with this? We see what Peterson's doing this. So what do you think of what Peterson's doing with it? And then we can move into that more broadly.
Yeah, so I'm going to try and articulate what I think here. Cause it's all, this is the way I think. I got to get it out. And it's all just shaken up in there like a snow globe. Maybe some of you who are listening will be like, I get you, Megan. It's okay. No, I think that this answer is going to be very unsatisfactory to people who are as rational as Peterson, but it is not an irrational answer. Because I am thinking rationally, but I know that my rational thinking is limited. And so here's where it comes in. And I no disrespect, my respect for Jordan Peterson is very high. I think it takes a certain amount of humility that I'm learning to have. And I'm going to make that part very clear, of going and something like what Chesterton talked about. You can make a rational explanation for just about anything that you want to justify. Whether it's something like this or whatever, we can spin it in a circle and make it totally rational. But that's only looking through the world with one lens, and we have two, right? So the reality is, what we're talking about this whole time is that not only can we talk about truth and goodness, can we talk about science, can we talk about reason and rationality? We can do that. But we also have this whole other lens that is imagination, that is beauty, that is the simply, I just want to revel in it. I don't know that I need to explain it all. I want to try because that's my tendency, but the sunrise can be just appreciated because it's so much bigger than me and so much more than I can capture on a canvas or in a photograph or in my words or whatever it is. And there's a part of me that just has to lay myself down and go, that was meant for more than me to wrap my head around. And that part of us, that imagination, that thing, I think has been so deadened because of the reductionist thinking of our culture. And by that, I mean, again, back to the revolutions that we've been on the tail end of between the Enlightenment of the 17th century that took things like morality and religion and values and relegated them to the realm of the unknowable, right? So that you just play with those. That's what ultimately led to the postmodernist, movement, but not all by itself. Again, that didn't just happen in a vacuum. History, people is all complex. Back on track here. What was I trying to say? I think that what my fear is that if Peterson is going that route, he may find a rational way to explain what he's trying to explain, but the universe that he's just created will be far too small. And he'll go mad. Not like, I don't know about literally mad, like in a straitjacket, but in a sense, mad. It will, because
speculation here, but Peterson has a high admiration for Nietzsche. He said it several times. He wouldn't view himself as the modern day Nietzsche, of course.
No.
But Nietzsche went mad, and Nietzsche was obsessed with the aesthetics. That's an interesting thing there. He totally disregarded, he abandoned any hope in finding an objective referent for meaning and purpose because he believed, in the death of God. He viewed that as a cataclysmic event, like the earth being unchained from the sun. He did not believe there was anything objective, powerful enough like the sun to ground, to bring that, gravitational force such that there would be something to order life and reality around. He believed you had to look within and create tables of values for yourself. And
that was devastating to him.
What's that?
That was devastating to him.
Well, it was, but and I'm curious what he found in the aesthetics though, because he became obsessed with them. He viewed like poets and artists and painters in particular as almost as if they were godlike. But the simple point here, or not point, but the reason to bring it up is your comment of going mad. Nietzsche went mad, and he was obsessed with the arts. And again, not being a prophet for Peterson's life here, but to your comment of when you're trying to find universe and you're trying to account for what the arts point to in this purely rational fashion, the universe you create for yourself is too small. And that could be something that drives you crazy. I mean, if you do all this work to find an answer, and it's not really a satisfying answer. What's left, right? What's left to keep you from succumbing to nihilism or some kind of, and the insanity that follows a true apprehension of nihilism without suicide? That does lead to
terrifying thought. This reminds me a little bit of what happened post Enlightenment, right? Post David Hume and empiricism and the fact value split that Francis Schaeffer talks about. Again, there was a lot that came into that. Because there were people in that time who were looking out at the universe, and they began to adopt this new truth that came from empiricism, that if all that we can know are the things that we can touch and taste and see and hear and smell, if that's what's knowable, then that means something. And here it means that there is no real meaning out there. I mean, it was a time when and by the way, let me just point this out because this is important. Like, people like that, and perhaps even Nietzsche, it takes a lot of courage to adopt a truth like that if it's true.
Mm-hmm. Right.
To look out at the stars that you're perhaps even at that time your grandparents had said, these are the heavens. And the music of the heavens is something that we can, if we just sit still long enough and appreciate, it tells us things about ourselves and about what's beyond. And here we have people going, no, this is space. This is, I can explain this. It's vast and dark and meaningless. And that star, that's a burning ball of gas. And it has a lifespan, and it looks like this, and we can quantify it, and we can talk about all of the components and the atoms and the way that they work and all of that, but there's no real meaning. And at that time, the reaction to that, which is, Nietzsche's not too far after all of this, right, was romanticism. Because the reaction was, as things like this in history tend to do, the reaction was very much a pendulum to the other extreme, to say, I reject a world that is that hideous. That's an ugly world, and I will not live in it. Mm-hmm. And so the reaction was to turn and worship the limited things, and nature in this case. We got some of the most beautiful poetry and art that came out of that period. But the idea behind it was that there was enough residue, I think, to where we have that beautiful art and that beautiful poetry that still like is clinging to know there has to be meaning. But we come on down the line through modernism, which kind of that was following that line of what we can know and master and conquer are in the hard sciences. The rest of it, we just kind of have to either make up as we go along, and the residue fades over time. This is a gross overgeneralization. Like, I want to apologize to all the philosophers who might be listening to this. But there's something here, right? If we tug on that strand, we get to this point in time where we're this far removed, and the split is still there running through our culture and our day and time. And we have people, and Mike, I've heard you say this before, we have people operating in those realms because we were made to. They're making moral decisions. They notice these things about the world, but they're untethered from any kind of grounding that would make it meaningful, like truly, deeply meaningful. So all that, I don't know where I was going with that, except to say this sounds just like that. Nietzsche to me sounds like that, going, I see that, and again, I don't agree with his conclusion. But if he believed he was right in saying God is dead and saw how cataclysmic that would be, it took a lot of courage for him to swallow that truth. And yet there was probably a part of him going, I cannot live in a world this ugly.
Yeah. Well, this is why I think that this topic matters in a really big way. If the arts and the aesthetics are not grounded in something like the nature of God, I think nihilism is the outcome. I don't see how I don't see how you can escape it. Because even if Peterson, let's assume, for example, a naturalistic world, a world that is the product of an evolutionary process. And let's say even in some sense, this subordinate Unitarian spirit, monotheistic spirit is the result of that. And it's the animating spirit of humankind at its best. okay, well, what is that thing? I mean, if it's the product of an evolutionary process, why am I bound to it? Why is it really that great? Why does it really give grounds to meaning and value and purpose? How is it not also, in a sense, subjective and arbitrary? And why shouldn't I just forsake it? Like, I don't see how that really gets us anywhere. You can almost pretend that it does, because you at least have something that is it's rational. It's rationally produced. It is beyond humankind in a sense. It could be something, if you were to build an ethical framework off of this, it could be something that people then look to together. And it's not, all cultures everywhere could look to. So it has this transcendent quality, but I don't think it truly is transcendent in that sense. And I think that it will become that thing you're looking at, and no matter how hard you want to believe that it is real, it isn't. And I don't think it will provide the lasting meaning and significance there. It will not be it will not be a sure enough foundation to support what people like Peterson hope it would support.